On this episode of Hudson Valley Hustle, I'm joined by Jake Garay, who is a local real estate expert. We dive into all things real estate and marketing in this episode. Hope you get a lot of value out of it. Enjoy. Jake, what's up, man?
Thanks for having me, Joe.
Yeah, welcome
Excited
to
be
the show.
here.
This is going to be fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love real estate. Like just the concept of it. I haven't invested in it, but I just love the concept of it. I want to get into it. I have no idea how. Maybe we could talk a little bit about that.
Absolutely.
Because it's always something that's been like on my mind. And you're a young guy, been in the game for a little bit.
Yep.
What exactly do you do in real estate? Is it more on the buying side, the selling side?
Yep.
Give like your origin story a little bit.
Yeah, so I got into real estate primarily in the beginning because my family's background was actually in real estate. So my dad's a contractor, builds homes, invests in real estate. And at the time I was working with him and he built a home to sell. And I was working with him kind of handling a lot of the logistical side of things. And the agent who sold the house for him was like, hey, why don't you get your license and I'll set you up in my office and you can do this type of work with investor clients and things like that. Because that was always what had interested me. I'd always had kind of like that entrepreneurial business minded. I was always interested in stocks and investing in real estate and all of those different things. So it seems like, hey, if I want to buy investment properties, why don't I get my license and I can represent myself? So that's kind of how it started. So I did that and, kind of eased my way into it. I didn't start out full time. It was probably about a year and a half or so before I decided, you know what, if I'm going to do this, why don't I see if I can actually do it full time? So I went full time. This was probably about mid 2016 that I went full time in the business. And I basically at that time said, I'm going to take every opportunity that comes my way. So whether it's a rental client, whether it's a buyer, a seller, investor, if it's a $50,000 mobile home or $1 million house, I don't care. I just want to see what happens and try and learn as much as possible. And so after, doing that, business started to take off, started to grow, ended up joining a team that I ended up partnering with my current partner, Garay-Michaud. So he brought me in back in 2019. He said, hey, look, I'm going to be transitioning out of the business and kind of looking for a partner, someone to come in and kind of assist me and help grow the team, but then also eventually take over. And that's kind of where we're at now. So, right now, my current business, I have a team with Blake. We have 6 agents who work with us. Wow. So a team of 8 total. And basically we represent both buyers and sellers. We do a lot of investment properties. We do commercial work all throughout the Hudson Valley. As I was just saying to you, basically the primary focus markets that we have are the 6 counties in the mid and lower Hudson Valley. Yeah. And so my personal business right now is probably about 70% working with sellers. I still work with a lot of buyer clients. I work with a lot of investors. So a lot of multifamily, a lot of commercial clientele, because that's just my bread and butter. That's what I love to do.
Sure.
And we work with a lot of luxury clients now. That's something that we've really grown and developed the last 3 or 4 years. We understand that market really well. Prior to COVID, the luxury market it ebbed and flowed, but it never really performed all that well. And what we've seen in the Hudson Valley now is it's become such a destination for weekend and second home buyers, Airbnb, so on and so forth, that we've really, focused on that market segment. And that's really grown as well. So we really do everything. It runs the gamut, whether you're, trying to rent an apartment or you're looking to buy an investment property, a $4 million office building or a, $300,000 multifamily or, buy your first home. We do it all.
That's awesome. Did that luxury market kind of happen kind of like post-COVID because of people trying to like escape the city? Did that
So it's really interesting with the Hudson Valley. A lot of people think COVID caused things. COVID didn't cause anything. It accelerated a trend that we already saw happening. So back in 2017, 65% of homes that were sold in the Hudson Valley over $400,000 were purchased by people coming from New York City. And that was in 2017. And really, when you think about it, that's a trend that's always happened, right? So like, for example, my dad's from the Bronx, right? He moved to Yonkers, then he moved to Mahopac, then we moved when I was like 4 years old to Dutchess County. And so that trend's always been there. It's just because of the cost in, let's say, Rockland in Westchester County or in New York City, people are just naturally making the progression and skipping over that middle step and going to that mid-Hudson Valley market.
Sure.
And then also the progressive companies were already kind of starting the work from home trend. We started to see that in 2017, 2018. People were saying, oh, my company's allowing me to work remote 1 day a week or 2 days a week. So now that commute becomes a little bit more easy to do. So I'm going to look in, Orange County, or I'm going to look in Dutchess County, and I'm going to see that if I can be in the city in an hour and a half, and it's 2 days a week or 3 days a week, that's doable. So it's not that it necessarily caused a new trend, but it definitely accelerated it. It did what probably would have taken 6 to 8 years and did it in like 24 months.
Yeah.
Right. So that's what really sped things up. And then during that time from 2021, 22, people were like, oh, what's going to happen is these people are going to come here, escape the city. And we certainly saw some of that panic buying. And people just assumed that because they made such a rash decision to buy, that they would just immediately, once the pandemic was over, go right back to the city. And what we've seen is people haven't done that. I've had a lot of clients, oh, we're buying a weekend home. They now live here full time. Or, oh, we're buying a house and we're going to retire in 10 years. And in 3 years, they're here. Because I think what they realize is the quality of life is so good and they love it and they just decide to stay. And then what ends up happening is they tell their friends about it. Their friends come and visit. And there's actually a really interesting trend that we saw. We kind of tracked this. Back in 2015 and 2016, I think it was, I don't know if it was Bloomberg or Wall Street Journal had published an article. And the title of the article was, "Is the Hudson Valley the New Hamptons?" And what they did was they were tracking weekend activity, trip bookings on like Expedia and travel sites going back to 2011 and 2012. And what they realized was that the under 40, under 45 demographic was not going out to the Hamptons, but they were actually coming to the Hudson Valley. Because whether it was they were priced out or whether it was because that was where their parents and other generations had gone and they were looking for that new thing. Accessibility wise, you can be in the Hudson Valley in an hour, hour and a half instead of spending 3.5 hours, 4 hours in traffic going out east. And so that started then. And that's also when you started to see, for example, towns like Beacon starting to turn over and becoming really popular. And so what ended up happening was people were booking vacations or weekend stays, falling in love. And then 2014, 2015, they started buying second homes. And then 2016, 17, 18, 19, they started buying primary residences. And so then they started inviting friends and that just all snowballed into this big thing. And it really just started because people were taking weekend trips.
Yeah. It's weird, all these little pockets that are happening here in the valley. Like you said, Beacon, I know Hudson, even way up north is like exploding.
Kingston, Red Hook. Warwick is another super popular town. Newburgh, even for, and it's funny because you can kind of pinpoint which towns draw which types of people, right? So for example, Brooklyn is super popular in terms of people coming from Brooklyn to say Beacon, Newburgh, and Kingston.
Interesting.
Right? So we always say like primary residents typically come from the Bronx and Queens. Weekend buyers come from Brooklyn and Manhattan. And so we can see those trends of like, and obviously you don't know for sure, but it's interesting to kind of see demographically where people are coming from. And now what's really interesting after the pandemic is we're seeing a lot of people coming from Connecticut and New Jersey, especially northern New Jersey, Orange County and Rockland County, because they're being priced out of those markets and they're looking for value. They're looking for a place that they can go and get a little bit more bang for their buck.
Still be close enough to the city where it's not.
Ultimately, that's the hub, right? That's the feeder. It's the business epicenter of really the entire country and the world. So that's really where a lot of this demand is coming from.
Yeah, that's interesting. So like that's the city element that's having a big impact on that, right?
Big time.
But you'll hear news articles, news anchors talk about real estate's in the crapper. You'll hear others say, no, now's a great time.
Right.
I want to know from boots on the ground what exactly is happening in real estate, at least in our area on a micro level.
So it's very interesting because I have like a vendetta against like news media when it comes to real estate, because there's a lot of misconceptions out there. And also, you've got the big national news organizations that have to look at real estate prices on a national level.
Sure.
versus a localized level. And real estate's it's the most local thing that you could possibly have. So to be honest with you, here in the Hudson Valley, we don't care what's happening in South Florida, Tennessee, the Carolinas. And so, yes, the market itself, transactions wise, has come down. But I say to everybody, as a buyer, what do you care about? What the cost of the home is going to be. As a seller, what do you care about? What the price of your home is, right? Nobody cares how much your lender is making, how much your real estate agent's making. So just because your realtor is making less money because their transaction volume is down, doesn't mean the market's down. It's like, in stocks, right? You track the S&P 500, you track the index. You don't track the volume that it's traded. But in real estate, we're tracking the volume that it's traded and not the price of the asset itself. So prices are actually elevated. So last year, the Hudson Valley on average saw about a 5% increase in pricing. And that's pretty remarkable when you consider that interest rates doubled essentially in 12 months. And that's because of the lack of inventory. Now, every realtor will always tell you it's a great time to buy, no matter what, right? If the market's going down, oh, it's a great time to buy. You're getting a discount. If the market's going up, it's going to go up forever. You got to buy before it gets even more expensive, right? Yeah. When I work with buyers, it's more about, let's talk about your situation. Is this a 5-year home? Is this a 15-year home? Is this your forever home? Because if you're going to move in 3 or 4 years, it may not make sense to buy. But if you're going to be there for 15 to 20 years, there's really not an era that you can find, even in 2008 to 2018. If you look at that time frame, 2018 to 2008, if you bought in 08, by 18, you basically had recuperated all your losses, right? And by 20, you were positive, and by 24, you were up 30, 40%.
Yeah.
So that's why, if you bought in 08 and had to sell in 2013, you might have been in trouble. But that's why you have to look at it on those time horizons, because ultimately you have transaction costs that are coming into that. But when we talk about the market itself, the market is actually, I think it's in a very good place right now. It's stable. It's actually, we're seeing it. We just had arguably our biggest month ever in January, which is historically a really, really quiet month. And so I think the market's in a really good place. We're seeing interest rates coming down. It is a good time to buy. I think the savvy buyers that are looking to buy are out now, because what's going to happen is as we approach 6% and get at some point in the next 12 to 15 months, now everybody say, oh, we're going to cut rates 6 times this year. You're going to be at 5% by the end of the year. I'm not subscribing to that. I think it's going to take much longer than people are trying to sell you the bag of goods for. But I do think if we live in the 6s in terms of interest rates and get even down into the 5s at some point in the next, we're already in the high 6s, but getting into the low to mid 6s and high 5s over the next 12 to 15 months, prices will continue to elevate. Yeah. Because for every house that we have to sell, we have 4 or 5 buyers. And it's just simple supply and demand. And we don't have there's nothing on the horizon to increase supply. So the only thing that will stop prices from continuing to rise is if demand comes down. And to be honest with you, I just don't see any indication of that happening. People need a place to live. Renting is not a great alternative. Renting is very expensive. Yeah. And there are articles out there that'll tell you, it's the headline grabs, right? That are like, it's now cheaper to rent than it is to buy. And you kind of want to look into that and be like, well, what is the appreciation model that you're forecasting over the next 5 years? Yeah. Because if you go into a rental and spend $3,000 a month on a rental for 5 years, but you could have bought a house and had a $3,000 a month mortgage, maybe you got a little bit less with that mortgage right now. But what happens when you refi and your mortgage goes down to $2,600 a month and the price of your house goes up 15%?
Right, sure. Yeah, well, there's more of the investment side of thinking when you're talking about buying versus renting, right? Yeah. Not to mention your rent can continuously go up, whereas your mortgage, and that's presumably it's a 15 or a 30.
It's fixed.
That's your
if
mortgage.
Anything, right now it'll go down, because if you're at 6.75 and you could get down to 5.5, you're going to refi out.
Yeah,
and so your house can only get cheaper. There's a reason why the average homeowner is 40 times more wealthy in terms of net worth than a renter, right? Yeah. And that's because the home is the primary, wealth building asset for most people.
Sure.
And, I was just talking about this. It's not like you go and say, okay, I can have a $2,500 a month mortgage, or I can have a $2,000 a month rent. And you say, I'm going to do the $2,000 a month rent, and I'm going to save $500 a month. Right? What are you going to do? You're going to go look for a place to spend $500 a month. You're going to go out to eat a couple more times. You're going to go buy a new car. Yeah. You're going to go on that trip that you've been wanting to book. we're a consumer society. So a house is a great way to force savings because you're paying yourself every single month and you get the tax benefits as well. And that's something that's hidden that you don't necessarily quantify.
I'm going to play devil's advocate though, because this is the struggle that goes on in my mind. Great. So your mortgage might be a little more than your rent, but you're putting that money into an asset that's generally appreciating in value. But what about all the other costs that come along with that? The quintessential, the refrigerator goes, you need a new boiler, you need a new roof, you have to get your lawn mowed, you have to worry about all these things that happen. So like that's the other side of the coin where that can definitely make renting a more appealing
Well, let's put it this
offer.
way. Renting is easier than buying.
Right.
But that's also part of when you buy, you have to make sure that the price you're paying for the home is offsetting. So for example, if you build a new construction home, you can live in that home for 15 years, not touch a single thing, and the house is still essentially brand new when you sell it, so you're going to still get a premium. Now, you pay a premium on day one for that. Same thing now if you go into a house and the roof is 25 years old, the boiler needs to be replaced, the kitchen's outdated. Well, guess what? If you do all of those things, you're going to now get a $75,000 to $100,000 premium when you go to sell. So even if it costs you $60,000, that's where the savviness, right? And that's where
more long term though. That's more of a long term thing.
Exactly. And so that's where, as a broker, that's where we're supposed to earn our value. The problem that we have is that a lot of people hire, their Aunt Sally who sells one house a year, or their friend who's brand new who has no mentor, no coaching whatsoever, and they don't weigh the financial benefits and negatives when they're purchasing.
Yeah.
And that's also why I sell people all the time. I'm like, hey, you're moving to the area, you don't know where you want to be, you might move in 2 years, don't buy. It doesn't make sense to buy because the costs of that, like you just said, are not going to make any sense. But if you're going to be someplace and you don't want to move, right? Because the other thing is you get security. So as a tenant, right, at any given time, the landlord could tell you to leave. They just got to give you notice and you're out the door. And you might have gotten a great deal on that rent, but they may sell that place and that new landlord says, no, your rent's up 15, 20%, or you got to leave. And so you also have that security, and then you also have the ability to invest in your home, right? So you can look at areas and ways to improve the quality of the home to reap the benefits down the road. But you've got to have that investor mindset, right? Yeah. So a lot of people, and this is something that we've seen as a trend, right? So for a long time, millennials were not buying homes. And everybody was like, the American dream's dead. Nobody's buying homes anymore. You're not going to do it. You're not going to see it. Millennials aren't doing it. And that was 2016, 17, 18, 2015, they weren't buying. And part of that was probably because of student loan debt, because of the fact that they had 50, 100, 150,000 in student loan debt. They couldn't afford to buy. But what we're now seeing is instead of buying a home at 25, getting married and having kids, they're just doing it at 32, 34, 35. Right. You know what I mean? I'm 29. I'm getting married in May. Like, we just bought our first house together. Yeah. We didn't do it at 23 or 24 like my dad did.
Yeah.
So it's delayed. The time frame is delayed, but people still want that. They still want that house for their family. They want that security. If you have kids, you want your kids to stay in that same school district, have their friends, grow up together, do all those things. You rent, you lose the ability to have control over that. You're ultimately putting someone else in control of your entire lifestyle. And so that's where I think having the right advisor to kind of say to you, hey, where are you at in life? Are you working 12 hours a day? Do you have time to mow the lawn? Do you have time? What is your priorities on a Saturday and Sunday? Do you want to sit around and watch the football game, or do you want to go and fix up your house? And if you want to sit around and watch the football game because you just worked 60 hours, you may not want to buy. Or maybe you buy a condo or a townhouse where the maintenance is taken care of. So like we bought an apartment because I work 12, 14 hours a day. My fiance works 10 hours a day. Yeah. We're home at 7, 8 o'clock at night, and we're gone at 6 o'clock in the morning. Saturday and Sunday, I don't want to be around mowing the lawn and doing all those things. Fixing a boiler or fixing a leak or doing all those different things. Yeah. So we bought something where the maintenance is taken care of, but we still own it. So we still have control of that. It's looking at all of the different options.
It's so situational, right? Like it's all based on your individual needs and your desires, and whether
1,000,000%.
Short term, long term, that kind of a thing. You had talked about the aunt that sells a house a year, right? We all know those people. What do you say to people that are thinking about getting into selling real estate, into becoming a realtor, that want to do it as their side hustle and not their main gig?
It's not about part-time versus full-time. It's about how dedicated are you to learning and having the knowledge and representing the industry in the right light, right? It's the same thing as I'm sure you see in your business. Oh, every 22-year-old with an Instagram account knows how to run a social media marketing agency, right? You don't. And so as an agent, it's our job to stay on top of current trends, to know what's going on, to know the law, to know what the market's at. And if you're not in it, and when I say in it, you don't have to be working with clients, but studying the market, watching the inventory, understanding, going to the office meetings and hearing stories from other brokers who are full-time and knowing what's going on, you're putting yourself at a competitive disadvantage. I get buyers all the time who've been looking for 6, 12, 18 months, and they keep putting offers in on houses and they don't win the bids. And they come to me and they say, you know what, we're looking for a change because we're frustrated. We can't get an offer accepted. And then I'm like, well, have you put in an escalation clause? Have you decided, these are the things that you can put into your offer. They're like, we don't even know what those are. They've never been discussed with us.
Sure.
And so that's a misrepresentation from their agent to their client, because that person now is going to end up paying a higher interest rate. They're going to end up paying 5 to 10% more for that house because their agent did not properly represent them 18 months ago when they could have bought.
Yeah.
And so that, for me, the barrier to entry for real estate is extremely low. In New York State, you take a 75-hour course, you pass 2 multiple choice tests, and that's it.
And
you're licensed. I could give you 50 different brokers that hire anybody with a pulse. They say they're going to interview you. Oh, come in, pay our desk fee. Come in, we'll set you up and that's it. Go off to the races. And all the education for real estate and all of the training is not how to be a good broker or a good agent. It's how to not get sued. It's how to not do something that's illegal. But it's not necessarily like, hey, this is the best way to represent your client. And the industry, the problem with the industry in a lot of ways is the best brokers don't have the time to take on a mentor or a mentee and go in and help the new agents.
Yeah.
And so you end up with people who are not necessarily the most skilled or the best teaching the newest people. And now this is obviously generalization, right? That's why we have a team. That's why, I always tell new agents, if you're going to be a new agent, and it's okay to be part-time, just have full-time dedication. Right? Like we have a couple agents on our team who are part-time, but they work 30, 40 hours a week because they're out Saturdays and Sundays with their clients.
Right.
They're tuning into the trainings. They're coming, they're at their showings. They get off of work at 4 and they're showing houses from 5, 6, 7, 8.
But dude, come on. That doesn't sound like it's the rule. That sounds like the exception.
But that's
because like you said, the barrier to entry is so low, and I thought everybody wants to sell real estate.
That's why we don't bring everybody. We don't bring the person on who wants to do 1 deal a year, 2 deals a year, and it's okay to do that. There's nothing wrong with it.
Right.
It's just my philosophy for my team, my business, how we run things, and this is how I approach my clients. I don't want the person I don't want the customer. Like you don't market, it's classic marketing 101, right? You don't want everybody. You just want the people who relate to what you're doing. And for me, I want the people who look at their broker as an advisor, the same way they look at their accountant, the same way they look at their attorney, right? If you want to have someone who's gonna, bake you cookies and, bring you to the local coffee shop, our team, we could do that. But really what we're here to do is make sure that you make the smart financial decisions so you don't end up in a bad situation. And that's how I want us to be looked at. That's how I want the industry to be looked at. I have clients who buy houses overseas and they call me for my opinion, or in other states. And that's how I want to be looked at. The same way that you call your accountant if you want to make an investment or do something for your business, or you call your attorney for legal advice. That's how a home is typically the biggest asset in anybody's portfolio, right? That's what makes up the majority of someone's net worth. And then you hire the person who's responsible for protecting you with that asset based on what? a Google search that you never met them, you never interviewed them, you don't know if there's
my friend's aunt who sells a house a year.
Yeah. Exactly. And they're super nice people, and there's tons of people that are like that.
I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it. I'm just saying that from a client's perspective,
100%.
The benefits to finding somebody that does this, that lives and breathes it, is going to benefit them way more.
And guess what? I know agents out there who do 2 or 3 deals a year, and they are phenomenal at representing their clients. It's just knowing and do the due diligence up front to know that person's on top of what they're doing. It's nothing wrong with people who say, I want to supplement my income with this. That's totally fine. But you've got to be dedicated to your clients. You're a fiduciary, right? You hold a license. You have a responsibility to them. Make sure you're protecting them. And so that's just my philosophy on that. Yeah. I just think it's important that people, and so, from an industry perspective, the reason I believe so strongly in this is we have a ton of lawsuits right now questioning commissions, right? In real estate. And there's a lot of misinformation about there that they're fixed. They're not fixed. Every commission is negotiable. It's ultimately, transparency is the way forward in everything, right? And I'm ultimately, even with my team, 100% transparent on everything, but there's a lot of agents who aren't. And if real estate brokers and agents actually rate lower than used car salespeople on a trust scale. So when I look at stuff like that, why do you think that is? Because there's a lot of people out there misrepresenting their clients. There's a lot of people out there who say, oh, real estate's a great way to come in. I'll sell 4, 5, 6 houses a year. I'll make $5,000, $10,000, $15,000 per house. And they're just salesy, sleazy salespeople. Yeah. And I don't want those people in the industry, right? Those are the people who think it's a quick way to make money. And what happens is when you have those people in your industry, what ends up happening is people question your value. They question. And so then what ends up happening is you end up in lawsuits. And if you don't police your own industry, then the government will police it for you.
Sure.
Right? And so that's what we're seeing now is these lawsuits are a result of people questioning the value of realtors. And there's a lot of people who've come to the defense of realtors saying, hey, my real estate agent represented me phenomenally. They earned their 2%, 3%, whatever that is. But that's not necessarily the rule. It's a lot of the times the exception to the rule. Sure. And so we're in this very interesting transitionary kind of place right now, as an industry. And so I just think it's important that the public is educated on what a real good broker will do for you versus, Aunt Sally.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. You have to, as a buyer or as a seller, you have to do your research. Like find somebody that this is what they do day in and day out. I know I won't want that person that just does this as a quick way to make money and thinks that this is just an easy side hustle that they can just get their license and make an extra $15,000, $20,000 a year. It's not who I would want, right? Especially for an asset that should last me potentially the rest of my life. Right. Like why would I put that kind of trust in somebody?
And for buyers, how the industry is operated is that the listing agent signs a commission agreement with the seller, and then they offer what's called a co-broke agreement to any brokers who bring in a buyer. And so the seller has typically paid the commissions. So the buyer doesn't come out of pocket for their agent whatsoever.
Right.
So when you don't see the cost, you don't really care, right? And so you don't, and the hardest thing is you don't know how much your agent cost you. There's no way to prove it, right? So if you overpay or underpay for a house, you get a great deal. There's no true way to tell until it's too late, until 5 years later, right? You don't know if you overpaid or if you got a great deal, and so that's the hard thing for buyers. They say, oh yeah, I'm happy to bring in my friend who's brand new and help them out. Yeah. And that's fine. Again, everybody needs to start somewhere. Right, that's the big thing. Like, I know people. I have had clients who say, when I was brand new in the business, I'm glad that you're brand new. I'm totally okay with that because I was transparent with them and I told them that, and they accepted that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that's part of it. And the buyers, and that's okay. It's just I think the consumer should have the right to choose who they work with, and they should have the right to know the knowledge base of the broker or the agent that they're working with, so they know what they're getting themselves into. And if they accept that, that's totally fine.
It's on them.
But just transparency.
Yeah. So you're looking at, so you think there's got to be some reform in this industry as far as that, right? Like,
I just think that the threshold should be higher. Like we should hold ourselves to a higher standard. That's really what I think. I think that we should be looking at ourselves and saying, what can we do to best represent? Like I go to conferences and it's always like, what can the agents do? The agents do. It's always agent centric. And I'm looking at it and saying, that's not what matters. What matters is the consumer, and it's what the consumer wants. And ultimately, how do we provide the most value to them? Because the more value you give, the more they'll value you. Right? So that's always my approach. That's our team's approach. But that's not how most agents operate. And that's my concern.
Yeah.
It's me, not you.
That's just customer service 101, right? Like
1,000,000%.
Take care of the customer first. Everything will happen after. Like that's just take care of the customer. Speaking on something that you want to see change. This is something that bothers me about realtors. And it's just because I'm a marketing guy, how they market. Okay. I got to ask you, because I will shit on it.
Please do.
The billboards with the black and white pictures and of the agent's face. And what are your thoughts on that? I hate it. I think it's old, it's antiquated, it's got to go.
Real estate is an industry that has always been the last to adapt. Because and it's not a knock, but the average real estate agent is a 57-year-old woman, second or third career. That's just demographically.
Interesting.
So that's what it is. And nothing against any of that, but that just like, where do you see disruption usually? It's usually like tech companies. Like I've always looked at my business as like, what would a tech startup do, right? You run lean, cut cost, innovate, try and disrupt. There's not a lot of that in the real estate industry.
Yeah, sure.
And ultimately, when you talk about real estate, marketing is like, it's the lifeblood of your business. Because if you have a good marketing system and you generate leads, you get customers and you make money. And direct mail is like the number one most popular real estate marketing. Then you've got billboards, or my least favorite, and I'll sit here and talk about it for 2 hours, cold calling. I can't say it. Joe, when was the last time an attorney cold called you?
I don't know
Never.
anybody that
No. They don't
wants
do
to
it.
cold call anymore.
Right, but that's what they do. They cold call. And it's like imagine you're sitting here, it's Friday, it's 9:30 in the morning, and all of a sudden someone cold calls you. You're not thinking about moving, nothing. And they say, hey, sell your house. And you're like, you're right. Let me uproot my entire life, sell my biggest asset and move because you cold called me on a Friday morning. Like, it's so dumb. It's so me. It's not value driven whatsoever. So I can't stand the billboards, the direct mail. We buy your house in cash, or we'll sell your house fast, guaranteed. And all of the marketing ploys, it's so gimmicky and I can't stand it. Nobody's sitting here and saying, hey, Mr. Buyer, hey, Mr. Seller, here's how the process works. Let me educate you on that process. Let me give you a bunch of tools and value to help you understand what that process looks like. And I say this on every single listing presentation. My job is not to tell you what to do. It's not to sit here and make decisions for you. It's to provide you with the information that you need to feel comfortable making an educated decision. And ultimately what that decision is your decision. You can ask for my opinion. I will never say you should do this. I'll say here's options 1, 2, and 3, and here are how those options can play out, and here's what that scenario looks like. But nobody's doing that. Nobody's saying in a marketing form. That's why a lot of our marketing that we're doing is just trying to educate people on the industry, educate people on how this works, just so that they understand the truth about how a real estate transaction looks, or the truth about what actually affects the value of your home. Instead of like, hey, it's a great time to sell. I just sold a house around the corner. You should sell too, so I can make some money.
Good idea. You know what? Let me uproot my entire family.
Right.
Because this billboard was really interesting.
I like the picture. I think that it was really cool. I like their logo. So let me just...
Dude, there's several industries that haven't lost that old way of doing things. And I think it's because primarily the average individual in that industry is older, right? That's what it is, right? The car industry is kind of changing now. The legal industry is kind of changing, but there's still a lot of that really old mentality. Accounting, a lot of the professional services are really antiquated when it comes to that. And
service-based business.
Yeah,
because it's people-based, and it's the people who are the most successful and have the most money to adapt and invest in these types of systems are stuck in their own ways because it's what's always worked, right? So if you've been an agent for 30 years, why would you change the way you're doing business? Especially when in service-based business, 60 to 80% of their business comes via referral anyway.
Right.
So marketing is it's an afterthought.
Yeah. Just check the box.
Right.
Yeah, I do it.
But the problem with a lot of those businesses is you leave yourself wide open to disruption, right? So like, legacy companies end up in a situation where they allow the door to be open for disruption and for new companies to come in and play. Like for me, when I was brand new, I got my license at 20 years old. Right? So I'm going to 40, 50, 60-year-olds being like, you should use me.
Yeah.
You know, I'm 20, don't own a house, but you should use me as your agent.
Yeah.
Right?
Great.
And my whole thing was, look, I'm young, I'm hungry, I'm ambitious, I'll work harder, I'll make myself available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I used to sell against teams all the time. I'd say, this is what they're going to do. They're going to come in, some guy's going to come in and tell you, or some woman's going to come in and say, oh, I sold 100 houses last year. And then you're never going to see them again, because somebody else is going to take over. I'm like, when you hire me, you get me, right? So you're only going to have me. And oh, by the way, I understand social media. I understand how to get reach and how to get exposure for your listing. And as a seller, the only thing that matters is how many eyeballs see your house, because the more eyeballs that see your house, the more exposure that you have, the more people that could potentially be interested, the more money you get, right? If 10 people see your house, you're not going to get that much money.
Sure.
If 10,000 people see your house or 10 million see your house, you're probably going to get more money that way. And so I would constantly sell against that, because it just leaves the door open for disruption.
Absolutely.
And, 9 years later, our team has been the number one team in our market for 5 consecutive years as a result of that. So it's the people who don't adapt die. It's that simple.
Yeah, I love it. Dude, we didn't even get to talk about real estate investing, and I want to. You probably have to come back and do an episode on real estate investing, because that's a whole
series.
That's a whole other side of the business that I want to learn about. But we can't do it now because this has been too good just talking about all this other stuff. But any thoughts that you want to get out in front of somebody that is either struggling in real estate, struggling as an entrepreneur, anything that can help them get over those struggles, or if they're thinking about starting, what would you say?
I say the biggest thing is finding mentorship, finding someone that you trust and who has success, but has the type of success that you want for yourself. There's plenty of people out there who may run a successful business. They have, no life, or they don't have any scalability. I think just finding someone who cares genuinely and wants to see you succeed. I know so many agents, if you're a brand new agent who's struggling, or you're someone who is trying to get into the business, who you can open door policy. Walk in there, sit down with them, and just ask them questions, and they're happy to share that information, because most people who are successful want to help other people succeed. I can get on here and tell you all of our marketing strategies, and I'm sure you do the same thing. I see what you're doing, giving away all these ideas. Why? Because 99.9% of people are never going to do them. So it's not competitive. When you realize that it's really more collaboration than competition, you can take a completely different approach. And that's how you build relationships, because honestly, business is all about who you know. It's all about the connections. Yeah. It's all about being able to reach out to people and just say, hey, Joe, what's working for you with your marketing? I see you're blowing up on social media. You got all these videos that are going viral. How are you doing that? And if you reach out to those people and build those connections, that's how you get through the hard times. Because when you can put yourself in an environment where success is happening and things are happening, you feel like you're a part of that. If you're not in that environment and you're home alone at your desk and you just feel miserable and you feel like nothing's working, you're going to fail, because you're not putting yourself in an environment for success. So I just think finding a mentor, finding that right environment to kind of stimulate success and learn by osmosis, right? Like on our team, we say you got to come in the office, because we want you to just be a part of the company, the culture, and learn. And I think that's the biggest thing for anybody. I think the entrepreneurship is very lonely. Real estate as an agent is very lonely. Owning your own business is very lonely. I think if you find people who understand that and relate to that, then it just makes it that much better.
Sure. That's awesome, man. This has been great. How can somebody contact you if they're interested in talking to you?
Yeah, absolutely. So My social media, Instagram is just my name, Jake Garay. I think my TikTok is the exact same thing. And my phone number is 914-772-2603. You can call or text me there. And yeah, love to connect.
We have to do another one on the investing side of things, because I'm serious.
I'm in.
Like, yeah, all right.
I'm 100%. I love that.
This has been fun. So.
I could talk about this stuff all day.
Good deal, man. That's what we want.
That's it.
That gives the most value, man. So.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me. This has been awesome. I appreciate it.
See you soon.
Absolutely.